And that leads into the second phase of the initiative, which
This whole program is a PR stunt. It has nothing to do with growing this company. I just don't understand what qualifications this man is actually supposed to have. Are we just supposed to trust him because of what he looks like? The board put him there to check a box.
You are not muted.
I'm going to pause the presentation.
Before we get into today's story, I want you to do something for me. Right now. Before you read another word. Look at wherever you join your video calls. Your laptop, your desktop, your phone. Think about the last time you were on a big work meeting, half listening, maybe texting someone on the side, maybe saying things out loud you thought nobody could hear. Now imagine 312 people heard every single word. That's exactly what happened to a woman named Lauren. And by the time this story is over, you'll never forget to check your mute button again. Drop your country or city in the comments right now. I want to know where you're watching from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button. This story has layers, and you do not want to miss a single one. Lauren had spent the better part of a decade building a career she was genuinely proud of. She grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, the oldest of 3 kids, the daughter of a high school history teacher and a dental hygienist. Nobody in her family had worked in the corporate world. Nobody drove a luxury car or took ski vacations or talked about equity packages and stock options at the dinner table. But Lauren was sharp. Relentlessly sharp. She got a full scholarship to Arizona State, graduated with a degree in finance, spent 2 years grinding at a mid-size accounting firm, then pivoted into the electric vehicle industry right as it was starting to explode. She joined Voltline Automotive Systems in the spring of 2017. Voltline wasn't one of the famous EV names everyone knows. They didn't make the cars. They made the infrastructure, the charging networks, the grid management software, the battery optimization systems that kept everything running. Based in Scottsdale, about 400 employees, they were the kind of company that was quietly essential to the whole electric vehicle revolution without anyone outside the industry knowing they existed. Lauren came in as a financial analyst. By 2019, she was a senior finance manager overseeing a team of 8 people and managing a budget portfolio worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Her salary had grown to $172,000 a year. Bonuses pushed her total take-home past $195,000 most years. She had a townhouse in a nice part of Scottsdale, drove an Audi, and had started putting real money into her investment accounts. She was 34 years old. She was successful. She had made it. But Lauren had a problem. A problem she'd been carrying around for 7 months like a rock in her chest. A problem that was about to explode in the most catastrophic, public, irreversible way imaginable. In August of 2020, Voltline Automotive Systems announced the appointment of a new chief executive officer. His name was Marcus. He was 51 years old, a black man who had spent the last 22 years working in clean energy, transportation infrastructure, and sustainable technology. He had an engineering degree from Georgia Tech, an MBA from Wharton, and had most recently served as president of operations at a major renewable energy logistics firm where he oversaw a workforce of over 3,000 people and helped the company triple its revenue over 6 years. The board of directors described the hire as a once-in-a-generation opportunity. Marcus had exactly the kind of vision and operational experience Voltline needed as they prepared to compete for major government infrastructure contracts tied to a new federal clean energy initiative. On paper, actually, not just on paper, in reality, Marcus was exceptional. Uniquely qualified. A precisely right fit for where Voltline needed to go. But Lauren didn't see it that way. From the moment Marcus stepped into the building, Lauren had a problem with him. She couldn't fully articulate it, or maybe she just wouldn't. She told her work friend Dana that he seemed too theoretical. She told another colleague named Ryan that she wasn't sure he understood the financial side of the business deeply enough. When Marcus implemented a new cross-departmental budget review process in his second month, Lauren complained in a side conversation that it was bureaucratic and unnecessary. When Marcus brought in 2 external consultants to audit the company's existing infrastructure contracts and identify inefficiencies, Lauren told Dana privately that it was a waste of money and a sign that Marcus didn't trust the people who'd been building this company from the ground up. When Marcus announced a strategic partnership with 3 universities to develop next-generation charging technology, Lauren rolled her eyes in the meeting. She never said the loudest part of what she was thinking. Not to anyone at work, anyway. She smiled in meetings. She nodded when Marcus spoke. She submitted her quarterly reports on time and answered his emails professionally. But something had been festering inside Lauren for 7 months. Something she hadn't fully examined, something she hadn't held up to the light, something she had been carrying around disguised as professional skepticism. The quarterly earnings call in March 2021 was about to rip that disguise off completely. The third Monday of March, 2021. 8:47 a.m. Mountain Time. Lauren was at her home office desk, a converted spare bedroom in her townhouse with a proper standing desk, 2 monitors, a ring light for video calls, and a whiteboard covered in color-coded budget projections. She had been working from home since the previous spring. Voltline, like every other company, had sent its employees home during the pandemic and then extended the remote work policy as things evolved. Large meetings happened on Zoom. Department check-ins happened on Teams. The whole company had become a collection of small rectangles on a screen. Lauren had a mug of coffee going, a legal pad full of notes from the previous week, and a mood that was already sour before 9 a.m. The night before, she had received the pre-read materials for the quarterly financial review meeting. It was a big call, not just the internal finance team, but leadership across every department, the board's financial liaison, and several members of the senior management team. In total, when Lauren pulled up the Zoom participant list that morning, she counted 312 people invited to the call. The agenda was standard: Q4 results, Q1 projections, investment priorities for the upcoming quarter, and a presentation from Marcus about a new initiative he was calling the Community Grid Access Program. The Community Grid Access Program. That was the thing that had been bothering Lauren since she first saw it mentioned in a memo 2 weeks earlier. The program was Marcus's idea. The concept was that Voltline would partner with municipal governments in lower-income communities across 3 southwestern states to install charging infrastructure at reduced or no cost, subsidized by a combination of federal grant money and a modest reallocation from Voltline's marketing and PR budget. Lauren had looked at the numbers. She thought it was a bad investment. She thought the federal grant money was uncertain. She thought the marketing budget reallocation was short-sighted. She thought the whole thing was designed to generate goodwill press coverage rather than to actually grow the company. She had submitted a 1-page objection memo through proper channels 2 weeks earlier. Marcus had acknowledged receiving it, thanked her for her perspective, and moved forward with the program anyway. That had not sat well with Lauren. She was still thinking about it at 9:02 a.m. as she clicked the Zoom link and joined the quarterly financial review. She turned her video off. She usually did for large calls. It was less pressure. She could look at her notes, check her phone, think. There were already over 200 people in the room when she joined. Faces in tiny squares, most of them with video on. She scrolled through the grid, recognizing colleagues from across the company. She saw Dana's face in the grid. Dana worked on Lauren's finance team, one of the analysts who reported to her. Lauren minimized the Zoom window slightly and picked up her phone. She pulled up her text thread with Dana. "Lauren, this is gonna be a long one. I saw the agenda." Dana, "Ugh, I know. You prepared for the Marcus show?" "Lauren, I've been prepared. Whether I'm in a good mood about it is another question." The call started at 9:15 sharp. Marcus appeared in the main speaker view, his background a clean virtual image of Voltline's logo. He greeted the team, acknowledged that Q4 had been strong, and began walking through the financial highlights. Lauren was half listening. The Q4 numbers were fine. She already knew them. She'd built half the report herself. Then Marcus transitioned to Q1 projections. Then to capital allocation priorities. Then, around 9:47 a.m., he began presenting the Community Grid Access Program. He explained the mission. He talked about the federal grant application timeline. He discussed the communities they were targeting. He showed a slide with projected installation numbers and a timeline for the first phase. Lauren felt the familiar tightness in her chest. She set her phone down. She looked at her second monitor where she had the budget spreadsheet open. She ran some mental math she had already run a dozen times. She still didn't like the numbers. She still thought this was a mistake. She picked up her phone again. She scrolled to her contact for Dana. Not the text thread. The actual phone number. She pressed call. Dana's phone rang. She was sitting at her own home office desk, watching the Zoom call on her laptop. She saw Lauren's name flash across her phone screen and felt confused. Why is Lauren calling me during the meeting? She let it ring. She silenced it. She figured Lauren could just text her. Lauren heard the voicemail pickup tone and pulled the phone away from her ear, frustrated. She set the phone face down on her desk. She looked at her monitors. Marcus was still talking. He was now discussing the community partnerships in detail, the specific neighborhoods, the municipal officials he'd been meeting with. Lauren had not muted herself on Zoom. She hadn't even thought about it. She was video off, she was on a call with 312 people, she was in her own home. It hadn't crossed her mind. She started talking. Okay, this is genuinely beyond me, she said, to nobody, to herself, to the empty room around her. Like, where do these numbers even come from? 312 computers played her voice through their speakers. In the Zoom grid, her name lit up with the green speaking indicator. A dozen people's eyes went to her tile immediately. Lauren kept going. She was pacing now slightly, the way she did when she was frustrated, standing up from her desk, moving toward the window. This whole program is a PR stunt, she said, her voice carrying the particular confidence of someone who believes they are completely alone. It's not a business decision. It has nothing to do with growing this company. People were typing in the chat now. Fast. Lauren, you're not muted. Hey Lauren, you're coming through on the call. Lauren, mic is on. Lauren wasn't looking at the chat. She was looking out her window at the quiet Scottsdale morning, letting her frustration breathe for what felt like the first time in months. I've been saying this for weeks, she continued. Nobody actually looked at those projections. Nobody actually stress-tested the grant assumptions. But sure, let's just go ahead with it because… She stopped walking. She stood very still. Something had flickered at the edge of her awareness. Something about the way Marcus had paused. Something about the absolute quiet that had fallen over the call despite 312 people being on it. She turned back to her desk. She looked at her monitor. She was still thinking about it at 9:02 a.m. as she clicked the Zoom link and joined the quarterly financial review. She turned her video off. She usually did for large calls. It was less pressure. She could look at her notes, check her phone, think. There were already over 200 people in the room when she joined. Faces in tiny squares, most of them with video on. She scrolled through the grid, recognizing colleagues from across the company. She saw Dana's face in the grid. Dana worked on Lauren's finance team, one of the analysts who reported to her. Lauren minimized the Zoom window slightly and picked up her phone. She pulled up her text thread with Dana. Lauren, this is gonna be a long one. I saw the agenda. Dana, ugh, I know. You prepared for the Marcus show? Lauren, I've been prepared. Whether I'm in a good mood about it is another question. The call started at 9:15 sharp. Marcus appeared in the main speaker view, his background a clean virtual image of VoltLine's logo. He greeted the team, acknowledged that Q4 had been strong, and began walking through the financial highlights. Lauren was half listening. The Q4 numbers were fine. She already knew them. She'd built half the report herself. Then Marcus transitioned to Q1 projections. Then to capital allocation priorities. Then, around 9:47 a.m., he began presenting the Community Grid Access Program. He explained the mission. He talked about the federal grant application timeline. He discussed the communities they were targeting. He showed a slide with projected installation numbers and a timeline for the first phase. Lauren felt the familiar tightness in her chest. She set her phone down. She looked at her second monitor where she had the budget spreadsheet open. She ran some mental math she had already run a dozen times. She still didn't like the numbers. She still thought this was a mistake. She picked up her phone again. She scrolled to her contact for Dana. Not the text thread. The actual phone number. She pressed call. Dana's phone rang. She was sitting at her own home office desk, watching the Zoom call on her laptop. She saw Lauren's name flash across her phone screen and felt confused. Why is Lauren calling me during the meeting? She let it ring. She silenced it. She figured Lauren could just text her. Lauren heard the voicemail pickup tone and pulled the phone away from her ear, frustrated. She set the phone face down on her desk. She looked at her monitors. Marcus was still talking. He was now discussing the community partnerships in detail, the specific neighborhoods, the municipal officials he'd been meeting with. Lauren had not muted herself on Zoom. She hadn't even thought about it. She was video off, she was on a call with 312 people, she was in her own home. It hadn't crossed her mind. She started talking. Okay, this is genuinely beyond me, she said, to nobody, to herself, to the empty room around her. Like, where do these numbers even come from? 312 computers played her voice through their speakers. In the Zoom grid, her name lit up with the green speaking indicator. A dozen people's eyes went to her tile immediately. Lauren kept going. She was pacing now slightly, the way she did when she was frustrated, standing up from her desk, moving toward the window. This whole program is a PR stunt, she said, her voice carrying the particular confidence of someone who believes they are completely alone. It's not a business decision. It has nothing to do with growing this company. People were typing in the chat now. Fast. Lauren, you're not muted. Hey Lauren, you're coming through on the call. Lauren, mic is on. Lauren wasn't looking at the chat. She was looking out her window at the quiet Scottsdale morning, letting her frustration breathe for what felt like the first time in months. I've been saying this for weeks, she continued. Nobody actually looked at those projections. Nobody actually stress-tested the grant assumptions. But sure, let's just go ahead with it because… She stopped walking. She stood very still. Something had flickered at the edge of her awareness. Something about the way Marcus had paused. Something about the absolute quiet that had fallen over the call despite 312 people being on it. She turned back to her desk. She looked at her monitor. Her name was highlighted in green. The green border that appears around your tile when your microphone is picking up your voice and broadcasting it to everyone on the call. The chat was full of messages. Dozens of them. Her stomach dropped 6 floors. But it was too late. Because Lauren hadn't stopped talking after the business critique. Lauren had kept going. And in the 10 seconds before she noticed the green outline, she had said the words that she could never, under any circumstances, unsay. I just honestly don't know what qualifications this man actually has, she had said, the words spilling out with the ease of something that had been building pressure for months. Like, I don't know if we're supposed to just automatically trust everything he says because of what he looks like. Because that's what this feels like. We put him up there because the board wanted to check a box, and now the rest of us have to just go along with whatever he decides, and nobody's actually asking whether he knows what he's doing. The chat had exploded. Marcus had gone very still on screen. Lauren saw all of it in the span of about 3 seconds, the green outline, the chat, Marcus's face, and she lunged for her mouse and clicked mute. Then she sat down in her chair. Her hands were shaking. She could hear her own breathing. On screen, Marcus was completely motionless for a moment. He was looking at something, probably the participant list, trying to confirm what he had already heard confirmed by 311 other people. Then he spoke. His voice was measured. Steady in a way that seemed to cost him something. I'm going to pause the presentation for a moment, he said. The silence on the call was enormous. Marcus did not address what had happened directly on the call. He did not say Lauren's name. He did not respond to the content of what she'd said. He simply said, I'm going to take a short break. We'll reconnect in 15 minutes. Leadership team, please stay on. The main call ended. 300 people's screens went dark. Lauren sat in her home office staring at her laptop. Her phone was already buzzing. Text from Dana. Lauren. What just happened? Call me. A text from Ryan, another colleague. Are you okay? Did you know you were unmuted? Then her work phone rang. The number was the main HR office line. She answered it. Lauren. The voice was flat and professional. It was Gwendolyn, the Vice President of Human Resources, a woman Lauren had spoken to maybe 4 times in her entire career at Voltline. I need you to stay available. You'll receive a Zoom link in the next 5 minutes. Do not log off. Gwendolyn, I can explain. The link will come through shortly. The call ended. Lauren put the phone down. She looked at the wall in front of her. She thought about the 43 seconds between when she started talking and when she noticed the green outline. She tried to calculate exactly what she'd said and in what order. The professional critique of the program. That she could maybe explain. Vigorous internal disagreement, she could say. She had already submitted a formal objection memo. But the other part. The part about Marcus. The part about checking boxes and what he looked like and whether he actually knew what he was doing. There was no version of that she could explain away. There was no framing that made it acceptable. There was no context that changed what it was. The Zoom link arrived. 4 faces appeared on Lauren's screen, Gwendolyn from HR. A man named Stuart, the company's general counsel. A woman named Patricia, the chief operating officer. And Marcus. Lauren had not expected Marcus to be there. The sight of his face on her screen sent a cold wave through her chest. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Gwendolyn said, Lauren, I'm going to be direct with you because I think you deserve that. You were unmuted during the quarterly meeting. Your comments were heard by all 312 attendees. The meeting was, as is standard policy for all hands and leadership calls, being recorded. Do you understand that? Yes, Lauren said. Her voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. I want to give you the opportunity to say anything you'd like to say before we proceed. Gwendolyn continued. Lauren looked at Marcus's face on the screen. He was watching her with an expression that was difficult to read. Not rage. Not contempt. Something quieter and harder than either of those things. I am so sorry, Lauren said. I thought I was muted. I was frustrated about the program and I said things that I should not have said. That I didn't mean in the way they came out. Stuart, the general counsel, leaned forward slightly. Lauren, with respect, I want to address something. The comments you made about the financials of the Community Grid Access Program, while inappropriate in that setting, are a separate matter from the other statements you made. The statements about Marcus, about whether he was qualified, about whether diversity considerations factored into his appointment, about whether the company should simply trust him based on, and I'm quoting you here, what he looks like, those are categorically different. Those are discriminatory statements made about your CEO in front of the entire leadership team of this company, on a recorded call. I know, Lauren said. I know. I'm not trying to defend it. I want to ask you something directly, Marcus said. It was the first time he'd spoken. His voice was even. And I want you to be honest with me, because I think honesty is the only thing that has any value in this conversation right now. How long have you felt that way about me? Lauren closed her eyes for a second. Since you started, she said quietly. Marcus nodded slowly. And in that time, have you looked at my actual background? Have you reviewed my track record? The work I did at my previous company? I've seen your bio. I'm not asking about my bio. His voice remained calm. I'm asking whether you looked at what I actually built. Whether you evaluated the work. Whether you made any genuine effort to assess my qualifications on their merits. Lauren didn't answer. She knew the answer was no. She had formed her opinion within weeks of his arrival, before she had any real basis for it, and she had spent 7 months finding reasons to justify a conclusion she had already reached. That's what I thought, Marcus said. He sat back. He didn't say anything else. Patricia, the COO, spoke next. Lauren, I want to be straightforward with you about where this goes from here. What happened on that call this morning created a hostile work environment. It undermined the authority of our CEO in front of the entire company. It put the company in a legally and reputationally precarious position. And it was recorded. We have an obligation to act, and we have an obligation to act decisively. I understand, Lauren said. Her voice was barely audible now. Effective immediately, Gwendolyn said. Your employment with Voltline Automotive Systems is terminated. You will receive a severance package covering 4 weeks of salary, which exceeds our standard policy under the circumstances. Your system's access has been revoked as of 10 minutes ago. You will receive written documentation via your personal email address by end of day. Company property, your laptop and any peripheral equipment, will need to be returned. Someone will contact you this week to arrange that. Lauren's mouth opened and then closed. 8 years of work. A salary she had built from entry level to nearly $200,000 a year. A team she had developed and mentored. Projects she had poured herself into. All of it. Gone in a meeting that lasted less than 12 minutes. Can I speak to my team? Can I say goodbye? Your system's access has been revoked, Gwendolyn said. You won't be able to contact anyone through company channels. This conversation is your final interaction with Voltline Automotive Systems. Is there anything else you need from us right now? Stewart asked. No, Lauren whispered. Then this meeting is concluded. You'll receive your documentation shortly. We wish you well, Lauren. 4 faces disappeared from her screen. Lauren sat in her home office for a long time without moving. Let me ask you to pause here for a second. Because I want to talk about what actually occurred on that call. Not just the professional consequence. The human reality of it. Lauren said out loud, in front of 312 of her colleagues, that Marcus, a man with a degree from Georgia Tech, an MBA from Wharton, over 2 decades of specialized experience in the exact industry he was now leading, might not deserve his position because of what he looked like. She said it in front of him. She said it in front of every single person who worked at that company. And here's the thing that's worth sitting with. The thoughts didn't appear out of nowhere that morning. Lauren had been carrying them for 7 months. Every meeting she'd attended with Marcus. Every email she'd read from him. Every initiative she'd seen him roll out. She had been filtering all of it through a lens she had never examined, never challenged, never held up to the light and asked herself, why do I actually feel this way? She had labeled it professional skepticism. She had called it concern about business decisions. She had told herself she was just being rigorous, just holding leadership accountable, just doing her job. But when her guard was down, when she thought no one could hear her, the actual shape of it came out. And 312 people heard it. Including Marcus. Think about what that moment was like for him. He had been leading this company for 7 months. He had come in with an exceptional record, genuine expertise, and a clear vision for where Voltline needed to go. And now he knew, not suspected, not wondered, but knew, that someone in a senior leadership position had been sitting in every meeting with him thinking he didn't deserve to be there. Thinking the board had put him in charge to check a box. How many times in a career does a black executive have to absorb that? How many times does someone with Marcus's credentials have to prove something that would never be asked of a white peer? The unmuted microphone didn't create that dynamic. It just finally made it impossible to pretend it wasn't there. Lauren tried to open her Voltline email at 10:31 a.m. Access denied. She tried to open the company's internal project management platform. Access denied. She tried to pull up the shared budget files she'd been working on that same morning. Access denied. In less than 20 minutes, she had been completely excised from the organization where she'd spent 8 years. She opened her personal laptop. She sat at her kitchen counter. She'd moved from her office to the kitchen without quite knowing when, and she stared at the screen. She thought about her mortgage. She thought about her car lease. She thought about the investment accounts she'd been building and the financial plans she'd been making for the next decade. She thought about her LinkedIn profile. Senior Finance Manager, Voltline Automotive Systems. That was past tense now. She thought about her resume. She thought about the question every interviewer would eventually ask: why did you leave your last position? She had no answer to that question that didn't eventually lead to the truth. She thought about the recording. Somewhere on a Voltline server, there was a video file of that morning's quarterly meeting. A video with very clear audio of Lauren's voice saying what she said. The company's legal team would certainly preserve it. Who else might eventually hear it, she couldn't know. She thought about the 312 people who had been on the call. Any one of them could tell someone. Any one of them could post about it. She wasn't naive enough to think it would stay contained inside the company. Stories like this don't stay contained. She opened Google. She searched her own name. Nothing yet. She closed the laptop. Her phone had been buzzing constantly. She turned it face down on the counter. She wasn't ready to see what people were saying, what they thought of her now, who had already made up their minds. She thought about Dana. They'd been work friends for 3 years. Lunch together every week before the pandemic. Dana had been on the call. Dana had heard everything. Dana had sent a text that Lauren still hadn't opened. At 11:14 a.m., she finally picked up the phone and read it. Lauren. I don't know what to say. Are you okay? Call me when you can, Lauren set the phone down without responding. Not because she didn't want to. Because she genuinely didn't know what to say. She sat with the silence of her empty townhouse for a long time. Here is the part of this story that I keep coming back to. Lauren had never stopped to ask herself a simple question. Why did Marcus's arrival bother her so much, so immediately? She had answers she'd given herself, of course. The budget review process. The consultants. The grant-funded community program. She had built a whole internal narrative about professional disagreement, about holding leadership accountable, about being the kind of finance professional who asks hard questions. But Marcus's predecessor, a white man named David, who had led the company for the 6 years before Marcus arrived, had implemented plenty of initiatives Lauren disagreed with. Lauren had submitted objection memos under David's tenure too. She'd had frustrations. She'd complained to colleagues. She had never once questioned whether David deserved to be there. She had never once wondered whether David was only in his position because of what he looked like. She had never once said out loud or in her head that the board had put David in charge to check a box. The difference wasn't the quality of the leadership. The difference wasn't the content of the initiatives. The difference was the person doing the leading. Lauren had never asked herself that question honestly. She had buried it under professional language and business justifications and the comfortable story that she was simply being rigorous. And now, sitting alone in her kitchen at noon on a Monday in March, with her career in ruins and 312 witnesses to exactly who she had been for the last 7 months, she was finally asking it. The answer wasn't comfortable. But it was honest. And it was hers to sit with now. The documentation arrived via personal email at 2:17 p.m. Formal termination letter. Severance details. Cobra health insurance information. Instructions for returning company property. Lauren read it 3 times. It was thorough. Official. Final. She called her sister that evening. She couldn't put it off any longer. She needed to tell someone who wasn't connected to Voltline, someone who would let her talk through it. The conversation was hard. Her sister listened without interrupting, which was either very kind or indicated she understood that there wasn't much to say. "What are you going to do?" her sister asked, when Lauren finished. "I don't know yet." "Do you know why you said it?" Lauren was quiet for a moment. "I'm working on that question," she said. Over the following weeks, she began to understand the full shape of what she was dealing with. She reached out to a recruiter she'd worked with years earlier. The recruiter asked, as recruiters do, why she had left her last role. Lauren explained. There was a long pause on the phone. The recruiter was professional and kind, but Lauren could hear something shift in the conversation. She reached out to a former colleague at a company she'd been keeping an eye on. The response was polite but brief. She wasn't surprised. The EV and clean energy industry is not large. People talk. She had assumed, on that Monday morning, that she was having a private conversation. But there is no such thing as a private conversation on a Zoom call with 312 people. The industry she had spent 8 years building a career in had heard what she said. And the industry had a memory. Let me give you the full accounting, because the scale of it matters. Lauren lost the $172,000 base salary. She lost her annual bonus, which had averaged $28,000 over the previous 3 years. She lost her benefits package, her position in the company's equity program, and, arguably most significantly, she lost the professional reputation she had spent 8 years carefully constructing in a competitive, specialized field. She said what she said in 43 seconds. She had not checked her mute button. The meeting was recorded. But here's what I want you to really hear: the $200,000 a year, the career, the reputation, those were the visible losses. The ones you can put numbers to. The less visible loss was the version of herself she'd been carrying around for 7 months. The version that told herself she was being rigorous and professional, that was asking hard questions about leadership, that was simply holding the company to a high standard. That version of Lauren didn't survive that Zoom call either. What took its place was something harder to live with but more honest: the truth of what she had actually believed, and the knowledge that she had let it drive her behavior for 7 months without ever examining it. That's not something you can fix with a new job. That's work that has to happen inside. Let me be direct about something before we wrap this up. This story is not just a cautionary tale about mute buttons. The mute button is almost beside the point. The real story is about what happens when we carry unexamined assumptions and never confront them. Lauren's problem wasn't that she forgot to mute herself. Her problem was the thing she said when she thought she was safe. Because that thing was true. That's what she actually believed. The unmuted microphone didn't create those thoughts. It just broadcast them. And here's the thing about unexamined assumptions: they affect how we work whether or not anyone can hear us saying them. They affect who we mentor and who we don't. They affect whose ideas we take seriously and whose we dismiss. They affect how we give feedback, how we allocate resources, how we build teams, who we advocate for and who we don't think to advocate for. Lauren's bias didn't begin the morning of the quarterly call. It had been shaping her behavior for 7 months. Possibly longer. And it would have kept shaping it, invisibly and with real consequences, if the Zoom call hadn't made it impossible to look away from. The question worth asking, not about Lauren, but about yourself, is what you might be carrying that you haven't looked at honestly yet. What professional skepticism might actually be something else underneath? What conclusions you might have reached before you had the evidence to justify them? These aren't comfortable questions. But they're the questions that matter. I want to end by saying something about Marcus that I think gets lost in a story like this. He went back to work that same day. After the call ended. After the HR meeting. After 312 people heard what a senior member of his finance team thought about him. He had a company to run. He had a quarterly review to finish presenting. He had a community grid access program to implement. He had obligations and responsibilities and a leadership role that didn't pause for the cost of what he'd just absorbed. That's the part of this story that nobody talks about. What it costs the person on the receiving end. Not just in that moment, but in every moment they've had to absorb something like it before, throughout a career, throughout a life. Marcus kept going. Because that's what you do when you've built something real and you know what it's worth. Lauren sat in her kitchen with her face-down phone and her cold coffee and the wreckage of a Monday that had started like any other. The meeting had been recorded. The words were permanent. There was no taking them back. Before you click away, let me give you the summary one more time, because the totality of it is worth sitting with. 1 quarterly financial review. 312 people on the call. 1 phone call placed to a colleague who didn't answer. 1 unmuted microphone. 43 seconds of words. A $172,000 base salary, gone. Annual bonuses averaging $28,000, gone. 8 years of career building in a specialized, competitive industry, gone. A professional reputation she would spend years trying to rebuild, gone. And a version of herself she'd been living inside comfortably for 7 months, also gone. That last one might be the most important. Thanks for reading all the way to the end. If this story stayed with you, hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me what you're taking away from it. And before your next Zoom call, before you click that link and join that meeting, check your mute button. But also, check your assumptions. Both of them can cost you everything. Always.